January 8th, 2018. Welcome to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people with a look back at our glorious history and our grave history, and a tough look at where we're at now, and a look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation, and simulcast and rebroadcast on the Gwe, CKWE, in Tyendinaga. You can find us at www.ltnradionet.com. That's where you can catch our show live on Monday night and Friday night from 9 to 10. And if you go there, you can also catch shows that are kind of playing in a loop, previous shows. So there's always an LTN show playing on ltnradionet.com, so you can go there anytime. I am John Kane. I'm your show's host and producer, and I'm joined in studio by my good friend Ross John and Mike Snyder. And we're gonna continue some of the conversation from last week, but I do have a couple of things I gotta kind of clear off first. I also want to mention I've got Jake Proud in studio. He's running our board and manning our cameras for our Facebook live stream, which if you are listening online and you would like to catch us, catch a glimpse of us on on video as well, you can go to Facebook and you can go to there's a number of group pages that this live stream is being posted on, but it is being produced on my Let's Talk Native group page on Facebook, so you can catch us there. Studio engineer is Kelly McMillan. I want to give her some props for our setup. And I want to mention the opening song is by Darkwater Rising, which is a Native group out of North Carolina, Tuscarora, by some accounts Lumbee, I guess, but Tuscarora, North Carolina. The lead singer and the great vocals you're listening to in that song, and we'll play a few other songs as well, is Charlie Lowry. Now, Charlie Lowry she's a great musician. She was actually a semifinalist on American Idol, and so that's how that's where many people got to know her. But and that was when she was a bit of a younger kid, and now she's a seasoned professional. Touring fairly often with her band. She also performs with Eulalie, which is Pure Faye's native kind of a cappella group. And Charlie she's a phenomenal performer, and I'm a huge fan of hers. But I have some news I have to give. She has been diagnosed with a kidney ailment, and she was diagnosed with IgA. I'm going to see if I can get this word out. I knew I was going to have nephropathy. I don't know. Anyway, she's diagnosed with a kidney ailment. Anyway, I know this was going to be a tough one. She needs a kidney transplant, and she's on a waiting list, but beyond the actual cost of surgery and that kind of stuff, which insurances and other may get covered in various ways, there are a lot of other expenses associated with it. So she does have a GoFundMe page. I do have her GoFundMe page posted on my Let's Talk Native page, but I'll give it to you here. It's www.gofundme.com/Charlie's Angels, and Charlie. In this instance, it doesn't have an E in it, so it's Charlie, CharlysAngel, Charlie's Angel. So that's GoFundMe.com/Charlie's Angel. Look, if you've listened to her music on your own, then great. If you've heard her music on my show, and I play it quite often, both here and in New York, I've actually had a chance to listen to her play live on a number of occasions, both at the Native American Music Awards and when she had come to New York and played in front of the Smithsonian Museum down on Bowling Green. I had a chance to not only have her or listen to her perform, but I had her on my show as well. I'm a huge fan, and if you give her music a listen, whether it is through Darkwater Rising or Eulalie, you'll be impressed too. She's actually briefly featured in the movie Rumble, which is a film that I've screened in Long Island, and I plan to screen at the end of this month in New York as well. a great talent, but somebody who is finding herself in with some health issues, and anything anybody can do. Look, I know the GoFundMe page, the target goal isn't real high. It's like 15,000, and she's a good way part of the way there. But it's not limited to that. We can go as far as we need to go with this thing. So by all means, take a look at her GoFundMe page and give her a donation, and I'd appreciate that. All right, so. And we will play some of her music as we go at the bottom of the hour, and then as we go at the top of the hour. It's from Darkwater Rising's Grace and Grit album. It's only 6 tracks or 7 tracks on the album, or the CD, but it's a great piece. So you can look it up again. It's Darkwater Rising, Grace and Grit. All right, so let me get to it. First, I want to thank you guys for coming in. I know you guys just came from a girls' high school basketball game, right?
Yes.
All right, that's cool. Now, Mike, Ross. I know that you had we had kids close to the same age, so we went to a lot of high school games together, and of course, you've got a lot of nieces and nephews that you've either been involved in coaching and observing over the years, and Mike, now you've got a teenage daughter that you've been involved in coaching on a couple of different levels. So. You have some experience not only with your kids being involved in athletics, but your kids being involved in athletics in the schools. Now, last week we talked a little bit about this Andy Bobstein, the coach from Gowanda, who was resigned in the midst of some controversial statements he made that were deriding a native player who he had coached, who no longer wished him to be his coach, so he changed schools. And when doing an interview on what remained as his star player at Gowanda, took the opportunity to speak ill of the player that he was no longer coaching. It raised a lot of concerns. Most of the concerns were just the inappropriateness of him making derogatory comments about a high school kid. But what got missed in a lot of the coverage of this thing is the underlying race and racial tones and the problems that our kids face in a public school. I mentioned last week that here on the Cattaraugus territory of Seneca Nation, the kids here are divided into 3 school districts. So if we weren't a minority enough in any given school district, by separating our kids into 3 school districts, it makes them that much more of a smaller population in overwhelmingly white schools. So that is, that's the numbers, and of course the numbers don't necessarily translate to overt racism or subtle racism. But the fact of the matter is, back since you went to school in this area, in spite of the fact on the sports side of it, we've had native athletes. And you both, Mike, you and Ross, you guys were, pretty renowned athletes in the schools that you attended. But you still, you could still get a sense, either whether it was through you personally or what you saw other Native kids experiencing, the racial tensions were clear, present, and oftentimes, displayed itself on a fairly regular basis. Is that safe to say?
Yeah. The thing that I see quite a bit is not only are kids divided into these 3 districts, the 3 districts push the community pride. So our kids are kind of stuck between, am I an eagle? Am I a black knight? Am I a panther?
Or a Seneca?
Or am I a Seneca? And to those communities, their schools, their towns, that's first to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so at a young age, when I coached football, Little League football, I always told them, I said, no matter where you guys go, you're always going to be on the walk up first and foremost. So when you guys get older and you guys are playing each other in high school, I always want you to remember that and have that respect for each other, because your coaches aren't going to get it. Your coaches aren't going to get that. your other players on your different community and your high school teams aren't going to get that. So but remember this bond that you have with the sachems, because you're always going to be tied to that. So that's really what I had tried to push in my tenure as a head coach for the sachems football team. And I think that hope I made an impact on these kids as far as their thought process. And I always told them that they had to be twice as good, twice as disciplined. I said, because they're looking for an excuse to sit you on the bench.
Well, especially when they, it's one thing when they're playing for a native team like the Seneca Sachems or Little League baseball or any of that stuff. But when they go back into that world off of our territories, and then they're not only competing athletically, but even in other areas of their scholastic experience, they're going to sometimes be challenged by who they are and the distinction. And the thing about being native, and I say this all the time, the racism is a little different. I mean, not only do we have this the mascot issue that oftentimes presents itself, where and the irony is being a native kid or a native athlete on a team that goes to play a school that has no natives, and yet they have a native mascot. There's not only an irony, but that actually gets used against them. And I know there are schools that have have where the student body, and they don't get. I mean, they aren't born with this stuff. So this is coming from parents, and it's coming from sentiments that are being shared in their scholastic experience, where our kids see this. Even in teams that didn't have a native mascot name, I've been to basketball games where I've seen, especially when you see a native basketball player who perhaps has his hair grown long. I'm talking about boys in particular. A guy playing with a ponytail, and I've listened even in home games here to listen to the visiting teams making sexual comments and calling a high school basketball player a Pocahontas or something like that. We see that, and it is not treated properly by a community. And look, if we're a native parent sitting in the crowd and we hear that, why is it we're the only ones that hear that? I've never experienced a situation where a school administrator or a referee in particular, who is closer to these players and oftentimes closer to the players' bench and listening to some of the stuff said, that they rarely ever respond to this kind of stuff. So this is the kind of stuff that is allowed to happen, and our kids hear it. And I know they hear it and they feel it.
We've been marginalized, so much that, those are the things that we've had to deal with, as far as, those racist comments that you're talking about. And you're right, is that oftentimes we've had to point out to school superintendents and athletic directors and officials that it is racist. And they kind of look at you like, what? I didn't get it.
Yeah.
And then, but ultimately, a lot of times they apologize for it getting by them. And, it's almost embarrassing to them to realize that once I really think about it, it is a very racist comments. And
including the war whooping and all that stuff.
Sure.
I mean, we've heard all that stuff. But again, I guess what we were kind of getting to a little bit last week, and what I want to talk a little bit more this week is, it's one thing for our kids to have unfair jabs taken at them from other schools, in competition, taking that next step towards antagonistic or inappropriate or racism. But our kids are experiencing this sometimes in their own teams. And I think that's, where, this coach, Bob Seen from Gowanda, found himself in a situation of his own making. Because not only do you have a player that, for whatever reason, and I never talked to the kid who transferred to the away from Gowanda, but for whatever reason, he didn't want to be coached by this coach.
Right.
And yet there are still native kids that are on that team. And clearly,
but there's other native kids that didn't join that team. And
right. And what we see time and time again, there are native kids who say, no, I'm not going to put myself through that. I'll play in the leagues down at the community center. I'll do other things, but I'm not going to put myself through that stuff. And
Sure. I have a great nephew that decided after all these years of playing basketball, he's a senior.
Mhm.
This was probably going to be one of his years that he should remember on a basketball court, but he's bowling, and just because he didn't want to be put in that position and belittled, and having to go through again that blatant racism that people just don't see. I remember back in the 70s there was a coach Schultz that was a part of the Guana program, and that we had an all native starting lineup, but parents went to the school board of other players and they demanded that you don't put 5 natives on the court at the same time. Now, I have to give him credit. He knew his job was on the line as a coach and as a teacher, and he chose to say, I'm going to put the best 5 players on the court.
But now, Mike, you mentioned in a comment on Facebook last week that there are coaches in Silver Creek who experienced some of the same thing. I think it was Silver Creek you mentioned that there were coaches that got pressure from the community about playing too many natives on the starting teams.
Yeah, the coach Janko, and him and I have conversation every time we see each other, and so he's a Buffalo City boy, and he played at one of the inner city schools, but he sat the bench behind all the black guys.
Yeah.
So. But anyways, he came out here, and he's been coaching there for a few years now, and his whole thing was he played the best. He didn't care what skin color, no nothing, and it just happened to be the best were the Senecas on the team, and he got pulled. They were winning. They went to states. For quite a few years, they were best in Section 6.
Yeah, they were ranked
in their division, in their Class C, and he got pulled aside by the school board, and the school board said, "You need to put the community members in." Is how they framed it, and he didn't know how to respond to that, and he says, "I'm playing the best. What do you want?" So, but then they tried to make it about everything else, attitude, grades, representation of the community. That kind of stuff is the lines that they like to use.
Yeah.
So. But he stuck by his guns, and he's still there. He's still doing the same.
And it's great when you see coaches that are willing to stand up. But the other thing that and we mentioned it last week, and we'll mention it again here, is that what we've tried to tell our kids is that if you're going to compete in a school off territory, you're going to have to work harder. Sure. And you're going to have to be better, and considerably better. To get the time, because there is that racial component there, and I've seen it and again what I've seen in Gowanda over the years. If they have a white player who shows any kind of promise, they'll skew the whole offense towards that one player, and and the buzz will go through the town about how great this player is and everything else, and even though when you look on that bench and the 5 best players on that team may have darker skin, you'll oftentimes see and that's kind of what you've seen. Even this, I'm not saying anything about this kid that is throwing 40 points a game up in Gowanda right now, but I suspect that there's a reason he's scoring 40 points a game, that the offense is being geared towards him. And again, I can name 3 other instances, and I could name names if I had to, where when my kids were playing sports, both boys and girls, certain the white athletes had the offense driven towards them, even though there was very, very talented native players on those teams.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the reality is the movement has been. Well, for basketball, and I think for lacrosse even, the movement has been high school sports are a tune-up for travel, because the athletic directors, the coaches, they don't get the college recruits that you need. There's travel ball and AAU is a whole another few levels above high school, so. I used to take more offense than I do now to high school as far as the racism, the lack of coaching ability. But now I just kind of look at them and say, you get ready for AAU. You know what you're in for, basically. But that's kind of the mindset that I had tried to instill into our kids. Your first taste of racism is probably going to come through sports, but it's going to come down to how you deal with it. You know, you can transfer, you can run from it, you can not play, you can. There's so many different options you can do, but it's more than just. It turns into more than just a sport, real quick. You know what I mean? And some of our kids really didn't know how to handle that.
Well, and I think your point, is a good point made here. Is how you deal with it in this context will prepare you for how you're going to deal with it in your professional career, whatever you do later on. I mean, because look, there's a lot of attention right now to how women have been persecuted in so many industries, and they get paid. There's pay disparity, and sexual harassment, all that other stuff, all kinds of stuff going on. But if you look at race, that is still one of the strongest outliers for disparity in everything from job hiring to pay to everything else. And if you look across Native territories, we top all the lists you don't want to top, and not just from social issues like alcohol and teen pregnancy and high school dropout rates and that kind of stuff, but we also lead the list in unemployment and in poverty and all kinds of other things. So there's a reason for that. It's policy driven, and our best bet is when we do have something like sports, that we at least have a segment of our youth population that are interested in, that we advocate for them, and again, although I agree with you, there's a certain level of acceptance, or acknowledgement. I don't want to say acceptance, acknowledgement that our kids are going to experience some of this racism. And I was one of the parents who thought I wanted to keep my kids from having to experience that. And we've talked about this, Ross, before. I thought, knowing the stuff that I went through, I don't want my kids to have to go through it. And then I realized that was a big mistake. Where our kids had to experience it.
And that's where, I always, when our kids were growing up and, they're playing ball and things like that, I told them right out front is that we can transfer you. We can do this, we can do that. But it's like Mike said, is that, no, you need to see this. And you need to see it. Why? Because you're going to have to learn how to deal with it. Yeah. And this is a good arena for you to learn how to deal with it, and so that's the lesson that you really go out and you try to get them to see it, because they're going to see it at every level. Mm-hmm. They were amazed at even the refereeing and things like that were stacked against them, and coaching and positions and playing time, and again, who was going to be highlighted, how you're going to run the offense. I had two of my sons. I had one son that realized that by the time he was in ninth grade, he realized that the coach came right out and told him, he said, look, you can take these guys anytime you want, but you're not going to do it. And his job was really to feed somebody else. Yeah.
And pull the rebounds down.
Sure. And he learned to live with it. But so he's a better man for it, because they had to live through it. It's not fair, but it is a life lesson that you have to learn. And you got to kind of get that thick skin if you're going to be Native, in communities like this. The other thing I want to say is that it's a shame because, like you said, here we're split between 3 school districts, basically. It's Salamanca. You still got 3 school districts there. You got Randolph, you got Allegheny. And,
so both territories.
Well, you got Ellicottville and Salamanca. But for the small population, what I try to get these kids to understand, and their parents and even the non-Native people, is like when they start coming on and saying, start making certain remarks, it's like, yeah, I understand. For the small population that we're splitting between all 6, 8 schools, we do very well, because most of these teams have some stellar athletes that are Native, both on the boys and girls teams. And what we always said is like, look, if we ever put our own school system together and our own teams together for the small school that we would be, you'd be running state titles after state titles.
Yeah, especially because again, the size of the school would put you in a class school that nobody could compete with.
And
athletes.
we're able to kind of help larger schools around us compete, with the handicaps that they kind of set to us.
Well, and I don't want to, although we're broadcasting here from Seneca Territory, I also want to acknowledge the same experience that the Tuscaroras feel with Niagara Wheatfield School,
sure,
and the Tonawanda Seneca's experience with Akron School District. Although there are some of those places where, again, because the population isn't split, I think there is sometimes better consideration to the native athletes because they know they have they do have to deal with a specific community, and here being split up, I think it does kind of water it down a little bit. So. Look, we're gonna come back. I want to talk a little bit more about this when we come back because the one obvious 800-pound gorilla in the room is when are we going to do our own school, which is no small task, but it certainly does become the solution to many of the problems we're experiencing, but not all of them. So we'll talk about them when we come back. We're at the bottom of the hour. We'll go out with another Dark Water Rising Charlie Lowry song just to keep her in your mind. And we'll be back after this.
Wake up in the morning with a smile on my face. Jump up out of bed, ready to start a new day. Thinking about what you told me last night on the phone. Sweet dreams, my boo. See you when I get home.
Charlie Lowry. Again, keep her in your thoughts. Do check out her GoFundMe page. It is www.gofundme.com/Charlie's Angel, and that's Charlie spelled CharlieSangel. No E in it when it's a girl's name, guys. Just remember, there's no E in it when it's a girl's name. So, so again, go GoFundMe.com / Charlie's Angel. Go, check out her music and make a contribution. She's in need, and I would say a lot, to me if the listeners of this program checked it out. And look, if Bills fans can throw $300,000 at a quarterback from Cincinnati because it helped them get in the playoffs, then maybe some listeners around here will give Charlie Lowry, who is a native person, with a
couple bucks. Anyway.
Yeah, a couple bucks. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, please do. Hey, look, I want to mention my sponsors, one of whom is in the room. We are sponsored by Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses. Eric White and ERW Enterprises. Good friends like my good friend Ed Schindler, Cynthia Trice, Neville Spring, Sugar Montour, and even the Seneca Nation has stepped up and supported some of the work that I do here. So I greatly appreciate that. But I also appreciate the others who have helped this program continue to educate, entertain, and inform for over 7 years. We're in our 8th year, and I thank all of you for joining in the fight and doing your part. I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net for providing our streaming. And thank, again, CKWE for both the simulcast and the rebroadcast of the show, as well as Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, and Indigenous Resistance Radio for carrying the program on their networks. I also want to thank all of you who share the show. There's several ways to listen to the show live, online, and on Facebook. And if you share the Facebook live feed, then it just exposes more people to it. And my wife puts it on a lot of other group pages. But any of you who share it, not just the live feed, but after the fact, share the video of the show on Facebook, the audio of the show on the SoundCloud postings that I make afterwards, and of course we do put the show on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. I do encourage you to subscribe to the channel so you'll get notifications anytime we post videos. And we post more than just the videos of the show. We do specialized videos on specific topics, and we've got a couple that'll be coming up here soon. So do check that out. During the break, we were talking about a couple of things. And again, one of the proverbial questions is, when will the Seneca Nation do their own school? When we face any of these issues, and of course, for those who could look at this thing just as a matter of getting our kids all playing together on the same sports team, that may be the shallower view of the whole thing. But obviously, as you mentioned, if the Seneca Nation had all of its youth in one school, there would be some powerhouse sports teams out of that mix, not just in many of the sports,
right.
Because we have we've got some great athletes, both our boys and our girls, and in everything from baseball and football and lacrosse and basketball, volleyball. I mean, we've got some
sure.
Some phenomenal athletes,
but we can't forget the artisans, the musicians, the singers.
Well, and that's the other reason for doing. When you talk about educating our kids and really kind of creating our own environment for that education, we can delve into some of the other co-curricular activity that would be more culturally appropriate to who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that we couldn't do some of the standard co-curricular stuff, but there are things that from an artisanship standpoint would be certainly different. But even on the curriculum issues,
mm-hmm.
I mean, clearly the way we would handle history would be different. I mean, one of the things I talk about on the show all the time is that we bring up issues of historical nature that people have never heard before. I mean, it's amazing to me that there are people who don't know what a residential school was. They
right.
don't know that Abraham Lincoln signed an execution order for for 38 Dakota to be hung the day after Christmas. They don't know about the massacres and the bounties for scalps and the origins of words like Redskin. So when a team picks it up as their mascot, they can claim all they want that it honors, but the honors are intended to honor us. But so there's so much that is not known. So, and that's just history. But in when we teach our kids, not just that we went through some of that adversity, but that we survived it and that we thrived and that we're still a strong people in spite of it all, that sends a little different message. And of course, when you correlate that with what you do with literature, how you address issues related to science and not just social studies, governance, all of that stuff, when you can offer a more objective view, not just about your own governing structures historically, but currently, but the governing structures around you, Canada, U.S., states. There's a lot our kids would take in completely different, a completely different view of education if we're doing it ourselves.
Sure. Just the fact that if you were going to build your own school, and how are you going to subsidize it? How are you going to build it? How are you going to maintain it? Without a tax base.
Mm-hmm.
That's a study right within itself.
Yeah.
And so people start realizing that you have to build new financial systems in order to do it. They have to be able to go and be able to direct funds in different ways, and it's a whole different atmosphere. So our kids need to learn how it needs to be done here because of our land status and so on, but also how it's done outside.
Well, and how we could do something unique. I mean, I don't think what you're suggesting is that we mirror the outside tax system.
You can't. You can't.
But you not only couldn't do it, but you wouldn't want to do it because we know the failings of that system. So we could create a whole different model that would involve, nation revenue, but private sector revenue in a way that is not necessarily put together the same way.
We were having this discussion today with the council, and it was brought up again. When are we going to do it? And it's not to say that everybody has to go there, but we wanted to give at least the people and the kids and the parents that wanted that option to have a native education system. But we had to talk about how are we going to finance this. What it means, what we're going to teach, and so now we had to do curriculum development. That curriculum development is going to be different, but it's going to be about decision making as far as what we consider our traditional teaching, and
the needs going forward.
Not just fed information.
Because the reality is, if you create a curriculum that is about strengthening your community as well, so you can bring students out of high school, not just via graduation, but even through summer programs, who can intern in everything from this. I mean, have a school radio station, a school television station. The idea of doing, teaching more about governing structure and about policy making and all that stuff. We could teach all of our kids.
You're 100% right, John. The station that we're sitting in couldn't be put together with the way that it's put off the territory. It had to be done a different way. Mm-hmm. And we're starting to have that experience on being able to kind of mold what we need done with what people say all of our great advantages, but mostly it's the disadvantage in their financial system where it kind of plays.
Our greatest advantages are opportunities, unrealized at this point, and that's so. The whole idea of doing our own education, it has many, many, many upsides. The downside is trying not to create a silo where our people are not aware of what's happening outside, and that our people are not as familiar with how to deal with the adversity of racism. One of the things that our kids do experience, and I'm not happy about it, but I know it's necessary, is they do learn how to deal with that adversity, or they don't. Because let's face it, it's nice to say that our kids experience this stuff and they learned how to persevere. But when I go back to that list that we top, all those bad lists that we top, those represent the people who didn't persevere, who didn't overcome the racism, who didn't overcome the poverty or the stigma of being, not just a Native person, but a poor Native kid in a school full of more affluent white kids. I mean, we do have kids that are suffering at a greater rate, and adults too, but all born out of that same experience. So I think these are I think given our current circumstance, we need to work harder to not only prepare our kids, but bolster our kids in spite of the adversity that they face. And that's, and I think you guys represent two examples. I'd like to think that I do too, of at least a parent and a community member who's done that. But we still, we still have a lot of kids who slip through those cracks, and who have shown promise in everything from academics to athletics to, any number of other skill sets that perhaps never get a chance to realize it because, the systems that we are deferring to, like the outside system, educational system,
Sure.
is not necessarily serving our kids. And we frankly aren't quite doing enough, at least not institutionally or from a territory standpoint. I don't think we're doing enough yet.
Well, I think, it was cultural shock to me. I think, and we talked about this on this show a number of times, is that I was always taught that, growing up as a young kid and, getting into kindergarten and then, going through the system, is that, you had to be a free thinker. You had to be a problem solver. You had to be able to kind of really be able to take issues and pull them apart. I realized that that's not part of the U.S. state education. Yeah,
it's about indoctrination.
It's about indoctrination
and
and conform.
Yeah.
And it's like, it was very odd to me. And, but that's what we struggle with. And it hit me harder because I was kind of self-aware that there was another way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's partly what our kids are falling into, is that they're being torn apart because on one end they have this territory, they have certain cultures. They, the word that we talk about is skana.
Yeah.
With the Mohawks is, how do we come
Create that
together?
harmony,
Where do
yeah.
we create that harmony?
Yeah.
And it's a mental process, it's a physical process.
And if we as parents, what we struggle with is knowing what our experiences is, and again, that battle with how much do we want to shelter for our kids or from our kids or protect our kids from, versus how much do we want them to experience and help them through so they do persevere.
Right.
And that's the challenge. I think, because, I have to mention this because some of the adversity that our kids face, and I want to be clear, has not necessarily just been at the hands of white people. When I think about what some of our kids have experienced in athletics, even as we've played some of the inner city schools,
Sure.
We've had just as many harsh racist comments thrown at our kids from black athletes, from parents, and some of the refs in those systems. So, and again, it's one of that. It's kind of that unique circumstance where you realize that even when we're as a people, we are faced in, especially in a competition situation or in some sort of this versus this environment. It's sometimes amazing what our kids still have to go through, and that's why you see it in many of the discussions about everything from mascots and everything else. It's hard to get other people of color to understand what's wrong with it,
right.
and and that's just one example of it. But I wanted to mention that because I didn't want to make it sound like this is just one specific ethnicity that view us a certain way, because everybody's been trained that same way to view us a certain way.
Sure. Everybody around us is basically assimilated, and we're still having that struggle. That struggle not to be assimilated in that kind of thinking.
Well, and the other thing, and we mentioned it during break, and if you look at most native territories, in the immediate areas around us, we have almost without exception, very conservative, very right wing, very red state or red area. Even though New York is considered a blue state, some of them, the more Republican sides,
sure.
and the more and the sides that are going to have a lot more Confederate flags flying in their neighborhoods and that kind of stuff. It's right here in our a lot more Trump flags and Confederate flags out here in Western New York than you're going to see down there in Westchester County. That's for sure.
It's the cities, even in Buffalo and Rochester,
Oh, sure.
and so on.
Yeah.
They're the ones that carry the blue state banner,
Yeah.
for the state. But
Yeah.
the rural areas, they're primarily from what I can see, Red, is
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Mike, I mean, what grade's your daughter in now?
She's in 10th.
So she's 10. So, so this is really, she's coming into that, that high school experience in a big way. She's transitioned from being a kid to that whole rite of passage, time period of her life is now. So now she's experiencing, and I know she's a pretty accomplished athlete at this point already. But what are your biggest concerns about what your daughter faces in these next 3 years of her high school experience?
Well, to go back to 7th grade, there was 4 of them that I've coached for a long time. Well, there was more, but the 4 standout athletes. 2 of them started varsity in 7th grade. The other 2 stayed and played JV for 1 year, and actually they got moved up for playoffs. I've seen the juniors and the seniors, even the coach, feel bad before the juniors and seniors because these 7th graders were more athletic than them. So she felt obligated. The coach felt obligated to play these girls just because they were upperclassmen. And that was kind of tough to move to. I understand, I get it. But at the same time, it was tough to have that conversation with Sophie because she says these girls have no business on the floor,
and she's a competitor, right?
Yeah, and I just said your time will come,
Yeah.
But I before I talk on her, I want to go back and mention, the time when Thomas Indian School had closed. Our members were forced to go to Gowanda. And I can only imagine, and I've had those conversations because I had to research Thomas Indian School. And they said that the first few weeks, there was nothing but fights.
Oh, I'm sure
there was nothing but
Gowanda
fights.
probably wasn't real happy about it. Certainly not the parents and the students. But I kind of think even the school must have one hell of a bit of trauma for them to deal with the idea of this.
Back when I was going to school, not to interrupt, is that people still didn't understand that we were getting you natives are getting a free ride and all this, and we're paying for all that, and without realizing that per head native people or native students, the school system was compensated
by state and federal
funds at a higher rate
than their tax base was providing.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, but to add on to your comment about the red communities right outside, so if there's already that generational racism there from even probably before they all got bussed on a Gowanda, the grandparents, damn well, they taught their kids, which taught their kids, and it's always been, I think personally, more so Gowanda than the other 2, because I experienced it more. Maybe my uncle, he always said it was more, in Lakeshore and Gowanda, it was more closed door racism.
Mm-hmm.
Gowanda was just blatantly in your face racism because they've been dealing it with a lot longer, and that's what they know how to deal with it like that, I guess. So I had to get out of Gowanda, and I refused to take my daughter down there because of what I experienced.
Well, and one thing I do want to get back to is when we talk about our kids being very good athletes, it isn't just genetics. I mean, the reality is we've got parents who have been working with their kids like you guys for, since they were little. I mean, before the Cattaraugus Community Center, the $20 million sports facility that you've had, you ran programs out of the Sailor Building, and in fact, we know that some of the coaches in these towns have referred to our athletes as being nothing but accomplished at res ball or sailor ball or whatever else in a derogatory way. But the reality is the reason that we, even back when you were in school, Ross, there could be 5 native or 5 athletes that would represent the starting team. It's because you guys played a lot of ball here. It
Sure.
wasn't because there was a great system. And the shame of it all is a relationship with what the Seneca Nation is providing here to support athleticism and sports and and obviously venues could be something that goes more hand in hand with all three of those school districts, and yet there's a resistance.
It needs to be said that some of the best coaches that I've ever been taught by or I've ever witnessed are here right on the territory, and they're never going to get noticed for that. Partly because they're not in a paid system. It's all volunteerism and all the rest of these things. But there's men and women out there that, are 30, 40, 50 years of experience, watching how the transition, say basketball has gone from, a two-handed shot to a three-point line and, being able to do certain things. The game has changed and they've made those adjustments.
Right.
And they're still there. Some of them are still walking around and doing their best to try to promote. And it's not just the athletes. It's that experience of coaching and that never gets recognized.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, when you talk about the generational support that we've had for athletes, and not just parents and their kids, but in your system, you guys have had uncles, in your case, great uncles, and that for generations have provided this kind of support for the greater community. And the difficulty is the same racism that our kids experience in some of these schools. Those of you who have tried to offer coaching services in the school districts have oftentimes been not just rebuffed, but completely, blocked, and whether it was coaching or in your case, Mike, even as a ref, it has been difficult to play a role in even in that capacity to support not just your kids, but the non-native kids.
Here's the difference is that in the non-native school system and coaching system, it's demand discipline. They're going to want to discipline you. They want you to obey. In a native system, it is, I want to teach you so that you can discipline yourself.
Well,
so that
funny, you mentioned that, and if you look at how there has been imposed regulations on how athletics is supported in coaching, everything from the amount of contact that they put football players through before games. I mean, because of the head trauma. The concussion rules in general. There has been, this idea that, if a kid gets a concussion that he's a sissy or just not tough enough. And, we've had a different, we would have taken a different view towards that. And it's taken a long time for the non-native community and all the way up to the NFL to fully understand just, what they're doing to these athletes. So,
but the athletic departments and things like that, they don't recognize why. Look, there's coaches both in baseball, basketball, softball, lacrosse that have coached on an international level, on a national level. But what will slide in front of you is somebody, a teacher or somebody that they're basically saying, well, I played basketball. Yeah. Or I played college ball. Yeah. And it's like, have you coached for 30 years?
Yeah.
Have you coached at that international level, or have you taken those kinds of tournament ball teams, and that's the difference between some of the standout coaches that you see on our territories is that they understand the system enough, the kids understand the system enough that they can pull a team together with very few practices because everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing.
It's that travel team stuff that you talked about because even in the absence of it was AAU, we've had travel teams, on our territories for many, many years. Mike, we're almost out of time. Any final thoughts or any final comment you want to make?
I was going to say, moving forward, and this is something we hadn't even talked about, but I almost hesitate a little bit when I ponder this question. Are we ready? Are we ready as a community to get behind each other? Because what I see down at Lake Shore is a bunch of talented natives. It's primarily the girls. And I see them right now. They're imploding on each other because they're all competing for Division I scholarships. And I see the parents rallying behind their kids, pushing their kids, not nobody else, stepping on toes. And if we are to build our own school, just like I heard my fellow brothers down in Cherokee talk about, they even though they got their own school, they still send them out because they don't want to deal with all that mess inside. So, if we're talking, let's talk Native. That's something that needs to be addressed.
No,
too.
because
we're
we can
our own
have
enemies
a whole
sometimes.
sense of dog eat dog within our own community, and that's a good point.
What and again, what we're talking about with the council today is that when you talk about Native education, you're not talking about non-Native education on Native territory. You're talking about trying to take that out of them. Mm-hmm. So that they can be respectful and understand that they can find that balance, that they know that they have responsibilities, not just rights. And I hate to say it, but in the non-Native world, it's mostly about rights.
Well,
and if I can get over on you, I'm going to get over. And it's not, no, I got responsibilities to carry myself, but also carry you with me.
Well, the question sometimes can come down to, is there still an educational policy about killing the Indian, and assimilation and indoctrination are a big part of that, and I think that's what we're challenging.
They want to kill it for resources and land, but in the end, they never take into consideration all the value of culture and thought process and philosophy that
problem solving.
Yeah, problem solving that this world actually needs again.
Well, I want to thank you guys for coming in. Pretty much wraps it up. We'll go out with another Charlie Lowry, Darkwater Rising tune. And again, check out her GoFundMe page, GoFundMe.com/Charlie's Angel. Check it out. Just throw her a few dollars and let's get her healthy. Let's get her recuperated. Thank you. And we'll see you back here on Friday.